Welcome in to this very special edition of the Bengal Tiger podcast. You guys no longer have to listen to just me, Billy Embody, because I'm happy to be joined on the site and on the On3 network by two of my good friends in the industry and now becoming family, covering LSU for the Bengal Tiger. Shea Dixon, Matthew Brune, welcome to the Bengal Tiger, fellas.
Thanks, man. It's been a while. I mean, for Shea especially, but for me, it's been a few weeks, and happy to get on board and get this thing started. And I'm excited for what we're going to be able to do on this site. So let's do it.
Yeah, I'm pumped. September 1st was a bit of a hiatus for me. I had 3 months where I couldn't really say much and just had to lay low and not work, but I'm pumped, and I think LSU fans will like the site. Anybody who knew all of us as a team before will get all that stuff again, and obviously building it on the On3 network with Shannon, Terry, and everybody up in the office who are the best in the business. I'm pumped to be a part of the team officially, and yeah, it's nostalgic doing a podcast with the three of you on the screen. If you're watching, we put it on YouTube as well. If you don't follow our page, you can catch the Bengal Tiger YouTube page. Billy, what's the plug there? We're on day one. What's our YouTube page name? Do we have that confirmed?
Yeah, the Bengal Tiger YouTube. Just Google it.
That was easy.
Find it. We got practice. Well, we did have practice highlights. We're no longer going to practice now that the season is here. But we got recruit highlights, that we shoot when we go to games. We got player interviews, coach interviews, all those good things, as well as our podcast that we're going to be growing in the video space now. That Matthew especially has joined us here at On3. I do want to take a second and thank Peter Rauticus, our contributor, LSU student who started in February just after I got to On3. Without him, this thing hasn't gotten even really off the ground. I mean, he's taken a lot of the leadership in terms of covering the team from the early going, while I've kind of been able to focus on recruiting and the message board and things like that. So a huge shout out to Peter. He's going to be taking a bigger role in recruiting now that Shea and Matthew are here. Guys, this is so exciting. I mean, On3 is as cutting edge as it gets, from the NIL coverage to the scouting department, that I really, really enjoy what they're doing in terms of getting verified measurements, data, as well as just, taking that, ownership of trying to do the ultimate best job we can ranking these guys. It's not always going to be perfect, but look, this whole network that Shannon is building, this is the number 3 one that he's done, the third edition, and he wants it to be kind of the final piece to his puzzle of growing these empires. And I mean, just seeing it from the inside the last 8 months, it's off to a terrific start. And September 1st around the network is a massive, massive day, and you guys are a part of that.
Yeah, no, we're pumped to be here. And obviously, if you're listening to us and you haven't signed up yet, it's $1 for a year. So there's no reason for anybody not to sign up. Obviously, all the podcasts, all the video element stuff will continue to be free, but all of the tidbits and kind of inside team coverage and everything that you've grown to be used to with the three of us will continue and carry on what Billy and Peter have been doing and build it into something special. But yeah, the Bengal Tiger will be running this obviously through the weekend for a little bit, but consider it to be today only deal then to sign up. But whenever you're hearing this, check it out. The Bengal Tiger on the On3 network. $1 gets you a whole year of VIP access. It's no reason not to do it at this point. Big season ahead.
Yep. I mean, film studies, recruiting, everything. I know what y'all two bring, and then this is obviously my second year here in Baton Rouge, second year at covering LSU. It's going to be a lot easier. Last year was a whirlwind. Like I told y'all a lot. It was like I stepped in here and immediately the season started. They immediately lost to UCLA. Then Ogeron was fired. Then Will Wade was fired. And so, yeah, my head was spinning. But now year 2, it's going to be a lot easier, a lot better. So I'm excited.
Yeah, now we've got 2 more insiders to add to the message board as well, which has been really a key piece to this. I appreciate all the people that subscribed in the Founders Club and throughout the last 8 months and have made the message board active and also clean and not a safe space, but not a bickering fest like you might find elsewhere. we're going to keep it that way. We're really committed to that. We want this to be a place where LSU fans can come and enjoy the conversation, chat with us pretty much all day. We'll have, a day that we pick for an all-day chat, but we want to be available to you guys. That's what you guys pay for, whether it's $1 or whether you're already on that full-time $10 a month or yearly, annual $100 or so that it is. I mean, we want you guys to get your money's worth out of talking with us, asking us questions, and we want to make this a site that you guys can be proud to be a part of, and we're excited to get this thing going.
On top of the chats, we'll also have weekly mailbag podcast that only subscribers can send questions to. I think we're doing every Monday mailbag. So there's another way y'all interact with us.
Billy talked about the shout out to all the people that joined on. Billy, when you got back, started up with On3 in January, you've built a big already community that obviously Matthew and I are coming to be a part of. But if you're watching this on YouTube, Billy, you're rocking the hat. I don't think that it's a Bengal Tiger Founders Club. There it is, established 2022. Nice print on it. Got the On3 gear on. Matthew and I are wearing nothing. I guess we
blank shirts.
Blank shirts. Despite this, I am committed today, but we didn't get any gear yet. It'll be in the mail.
Couldn't send it to you before September 1st, guys. I don't make the rules. I don't make the rules, but we signed you guys at 12:01.
That would be tampering. Yeah, that's tampering. We don't have any gear yet.
No, it only took about 2 days for me to get my whole swag bag of On3 gear. So look for yours very, very soon. Guys, we do have a game to cover on Sunday. I'll be out as well at DeSoto St. Francis in Texas, watching LSU commit Deshaun Womack on Saturday. But LSU kicks off the Brian Kelly era at 6:30 p.m. in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome on ABC against Florida State.
Caesars Superdome now.
Oh, Caesars. Oh, boy.
Caesars Sportsbook, man. They're taking over.
Caesars got to kick us some money, to get that name right. It's still Mercedes-Benz to me. So.
Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah.
That was the last time I was in the Superdome, was when it was Mercedes-Benz back when the 2019 team won its national championship. So.
Caesars has paid a lot of money for you to not mess that up, Billy. So thank you, Matthew.
Yes. Fellas, what you guys have been? Well, Shea, you've been away for 3 months or so. Matthew took the last few weeks off. What have you guys seen from Brian Kelly building this team since he took over? And especially just over the course of the offseason, especially you, Shea, when you were kind of on your hiatus, summer of Shea, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got to be there, I guess, for the spring. So I saw that initial foundation being laid, and I went out to all the media stuff, just wasn't working for anybody. But I guess it's probably something now that everybody notices or is talked about a lot, and kind of it's understood as, whether you want to call it building the foundation, whatever it is. But I'll go back to, what was it, day one of Brian Kelly, and now we're starting to see him talk about this be one of the things he's most proud of, is the alignment, right? That was the catchphrase of day one or week one of Brian Kelly, was alignment. And fans have had fun with it, all that. But the reality is it's tongue in cheek for fans, certainly, because they're excited that Kelly, even when he was asked about it this week, and he was asked about it on Wednesday's SEC teleconference, what is the kind of one thing you're really happy, with the program or the team now that you've had 6-7 months here? And he said that alignment. He said everyone's bought in and everyone's working towards the same goal. And I think when people ask and look, Brian Kelly has had success at the D2 level with the national championship. He's had success at the D1 level at multiple, G5, Power 5, whatever it might be, Notre Dame, a high level of football. He's had success. And behind Nick Saban is Brian Kelly in terms of win percentage across the past few decades. So I think when you think about if that's the benefit of hiring Brian Kelly, right? Like, you're hiring a guy who's won everywhere he's been. And then you're putting that with the talent that LSU has and can recruit, and certainly the Louisiana talent base that feeds a lot of LSU's success over the years. If marrying those two together brings the success that A.D. Scott Woodward's looking for, what the fans are yearning for, I think what sums up how he's been able to maintain that level of stability is alignment, right? Is that at Notre Dame, all these guys bought in. Were they the most talented roster out there every year? No, but they would win 10 games, and they would end up in a BCS type playoff, environment, whatever it might be, kind of right there battling to get into those sorts of things, or playing in a big game as we've seen him do before in the Kelly era. So I think LSU had to have that buy-in right away to set the foundation for what he wants to build. And how good they'll be this year, we'll kind of talk about that here in a minute on the end of the pod, or some thoughts on the opening game. But I don't think this year matters as much record-wise. You don't want to be below 500 again for the third year in a row, or at 500, I should correct myself and say. So you want to win 7-8 games at the least. But if that buy-in is evident and it translates to sort of on the field, off the field, everything, I think that's key. That's what Woodward brought him in for. So for me, that's been the number one storyline this offseason, beyond what transfers they got or who's playing quarterback or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, from Brian Kelly's perspective, I think you covered it. Accountability, all of alignment, all those key words and phrases. You talk to players and even, the assistant coaches on the team, and it's all very, very in sync. Everything is kind of in a line with each other. And I think I'll take it a step further, where it's really generated really good competition throughout this offseason, and kind of competition that maybe we weren't expecting. If you go down the list, it's like players that we expect to be starting, like a Cole Taylor, a Tremont Shorts, like a Micah Baskerville, maybe. We've seen at the cornerback position all of the competition with Colby Richardson stepping in, Sevyn Banks stepping in. I think the depth of this team has shown itself to be better than what we expected going in. And so that's why I think that's something else Brian Kelly's brought in, is that first year coach, nothing. You're not married to anybody. Obviously, Miles Brennan left the program and he's been there for 5 or so years. It's definitely brought a different energy in here. And I think that's just evident by the way, even if you look at Kayshon Boutt's situation, right? When he came in and how uncomfortable Boutte was early, and now he's stepped into that role as the number 7, as the leader of the offense. And it's just been a wholesale change from last year. And that's why, yes, it is. Accountability, all of those keywords are definitely what we associate with Brian Kelly. But at the same time, it has built incredible competition across the board. And I think it's raised my expectations of this team significantly. Coming out of spring, I was pretty comfortable at like 7 wins as like a ceiling almost. I think with Shea and I talked about it a couple times, like 7 or 8 wins, comfortable. Now I'm feeling a lot better about, in theory, and I don't want to get too far into a season predictions because I know we have stories on that coming on the site soon, but like I feel a lot better about this team going into the year because of the alignment, the competition, and what Brian Kelly's brought in that aspect.
Yeah, I think, I'm kind of on the same page with you guys, and it's hard because, and I talked about this on one of the podcasts recently, there are questions that this team is going to have to answer, but I don't know if it has many holes, if that makes sense. And I think there are going to be players that have to step up to make this season have a chance to be a 9-10 win type season. Specifically the quarterbacks, whoever it is, has to play well, has to take care of the football. A running back has to emerge. I still like John Emery to have a big season when he comes back into the mix. And then you've got a talented wide receiver group. You've got an offensive line that has talent, at least on paper. Can they put it all together? Tight end position, question mark, I would say, but not necessarily a hole. You have somebody in Cole Taylor that's played a lot. Jack Mashburn made a couple contributions last year. Defensive line is stacked. We all know that. Linebacker has some depth. Micah Baskerville not starting is a big, sign of that. And then you have the secondary, which is totally revamped. And I think the scheme and Matt House is going to, really be key to this season. I think he's on the rise as somebody to watch eventually as a head coach. Just talking with people around the country, they just seem to really respect him, and the players and recruits, as well, seem to really vibe with him. So getting guys to play hard for you is half the battle. And Durante Jones eventually had that last year, a little bit in spurts toward the end. That Alabama game comes to mind. Matt House gets those guys to play just as hard. I think schematically he's going to be in a better spot. and then offensively they can get the ball to the playmakers, and from there we kind of see what happens.
Yeah, you didn't mention the Brian Kelly, who Brian Kelly has dubbed as the next Brock Bowers, Mason Taylor at tight end. I mean, apparently he's the best tight end he's ever seen. So if Mason Taylor ends up being at that level of player, that could change this offense significantly. But that goes to what I was saying about like just new guys stepping up, and it's been interesting to watch.
I think one thing and we're kind of just now rambling on different thoughts, but when you talk about Matt House, Billy, I almost feel like Matt House, LSU's defensive coordinator, is the biggest tool in a positive way for this year, especially out of the gates. Because if you think about Florida State's, and Mike Norvell talked about this earlier this week, Florida State's played Brian Kelly in openers. They know what kind of game he likes to call. Florida State can go dig up Cincinnati's film from a year ago and see what Mike Denbrock's all about. If they want to see what Denbrock and Kelly like to do when they're together, they can go find film from when Denbrock and Kelly, Denbrock being LSU's offensive coordinator, who was at Cincinnati a year ago, they've worked together a long time before. So you can kind of match up and see things there. Norvell said they've had to go dig up like Kentucky film from his time before he was a linebacker coach with the Chiefs. They watched a little of Chiefs stuff for the linebacker stuff where he was position coach, and then even dug into some old Oklahoma State film, which would have to be like, 8, 9 years old, whatever it is at this point. So they haven't really tipped their hand into anything what they're going to be like defensively. Like, we just know they're going to be multiple. You know what kind of players they have, but what are they really going to do? How are they going to attack you? How are they going to defend you? I think that will be one thing early in the season that LSU's got an advantage on, because I just don't think Matt House has any film that you would put on the Kentucky film from 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and think that's what you're going to see on Sunday or whenever it might be. I think that's an early edge for LSU.
I know we're going to talk about the Florida State game, and maybe we transition to it from here, but I don't want fans to be concerned if Florida State puts up 24, 28 points. Like, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think Florida State's offense is actually a little bit better than maybe most people giving them credit for. That's why the line stayed at like 3 the whole time. I think Jordan Travis is a very solid quarterback. The running backs are good. If the LSU defense doesn't come out and pitch a shutout game 1, I'm not gonna be here like I don't trust it. I don't believe it. I still think Matt House is the coordinator that I trust the most on this team, and I think he's the right guy with this personnel to play the style that he wants to. So I want to put that little disclaimer out there. If it's not a shutout, if it's not a perfect game, so to speak, I'm still on the Matt House train.
How much do y'all think this game is still like? If I look at UCLA a year ago, LSU defensively, obviously the coaching side of it didn't work out, but they had players on that team. Like, there were guys that were good enough to beat UCLA, but UCLA had a good quarterback who had some experience. They had some good running backs, certainly, who proved they could run the ball. And they had a really great tight end. And I'm not sure Florida State's in that same spot. And even though they didn't have any Biletnikoff winners at receiver, Florida State's receivers aren't that great. And I think UCLA would have an edge in the O-line. So I guess my point being is, I would say that UCLA offense last year that they faced is better than the FSU offense they'll face this weekend.
Oh, man. Yeah, definitely from a week 1 perspective, I would not want to play that UCLA team. That UCLA team just up front and running the ball with Charbonnet and those guys were really tough. I will say the Jordan Travis his legs, that aspect of it adds a whole nother dimension that, DTR last year didn't have to worry about as much. But I think you hit the nail on the head with their receivers aren't terribly, worrisome. But Jordan Travis's legs, along with the run game, and I'll in the film story that I'll have out, you'll see it in the RPOs, the triple option type stuff. I mean, there's just so many different layers that his legs add to it. And for that reason, I think they're comparable as far as difficulty goes.
Yeah, finding a way to slow him down and kind of contain him is going to be key. And that's where you got to rely on Greg Penn and Mike Jones Jr. to really step up in that regard. And Brian Kelly even talked about Harold Perkins with his speed, being able to do that. They have options, and I don't think Matt House is going to be afraid to kind of roll some different personnel packages and try to figure out what the the right ingredients are early on, and you know, as you make halftime adjustments and things like that. I think it goes back to being multiple. They've got different ways that they can slow a team down. It's about finding that you know, that the piece to the puzzle and fitting it all together. So I think slowing down Jordan Travis as far as extending plays is critical. You know, last year he had a brutal game against Notre Dame, and then rebounded to have a really successful season for the most part. So you know, Brian Kelly's seen him as well, you know, even though he's on the offensive side of the ball, but he definitely has probably some takeaways to share with Matt House, who's also probably watched some of that tape too. I think LSU has a chance to start this off and win and you know, get off to a really strong start to the season. I'm just confident in this coaching staff over especially the first 5 coaching staffs they face. I think top to bottom, they're just a better group with a little bit more talent too.
Yeah, no, I mean the first 5 games of the year are what's going to, you know, dictate, and that's where, you know, that's a little preview for my season prediction piece. But yeah, the first 5 games are the ones where you have this Florida State one, Mississippi State, and then Auburn, and in there as the 3 big games. That's where we're gonna see. We're gonna see real early, and even though you have the Southern and the New Mexico game sprinkled in there, it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to seeing is how they play in this opener.
I think one thing too, that because we're talking about a Florida State team that does not match what you think of when you think of Florida State, right? And certainly Florida State hasn't been at that level they've wanted to be in, and have had a wave of coaching changes because of it. But it's like the SEC is a little bit of that this year. Obviously LSU fits into that category, but in my opinion, Auburn is not going to be a good football team. I don't think they're very deep. I don't think they have a ton of talent that you would normally see on an Auburn football team. And on the contrary, I think Mississippi State, like a team like that early in the season, returns a quarterback that's very comfortable in Leach's system. I think they return like 8 or 9 starters on both sides of the ball. Like Zach Arnett, their DC, has been there a few years. He's got those guys settled in. Like this might be one of the more talented, you know, this could be an 8-9 win Mississippi State team. So it'll be a fun season in a sense. If you're an LSU fan and you will just buy into the mindset, which is reality here, so just brace yourself for it, that you're not winning 10, 11, 12 games. If they win 10 games, Brian Kelly should be coach of the year. So if you're okay, if you're okay with that, and you're going to say, if we can win 7, 8, 9 games and show improvement, that'll be great. Well, you fit into that category where I think this year it makes a lot of the games really all must see. I mean, LSU is not going to be favored in a lot of these games, but they could go out and beat up on an Auburn and turn around and lose to State, and it not be because all of a sudden they played bad. I just think that the SEC has some just kind of different shuffling to the levels of things. And as you get later into the season, like Arkansas would be that case in point. Like people think Arkansas can win 9 games. Like that's an expectation when that would be considered one of Arkansas's best years ever. Not long ago. So the Ole Misses of the world, you know, I think it's going to be a fun season to watch. And when you lump a Florida State team that you're kind of like, are they even good or do they suck again into the whole kind of conversation?
Yeah.
It makes every game sort of must watch. Like I said, there aren't any games this year where LSU's headed into it that matter, where there's some, you know, 7, 10, 13-point favorite. It's like all they can do is mess this up.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like every game's going to be like a field goal spread. Like it's going to be 3, 4, 5 point spread across the board. It's going to be very interesting. Like regardless of how the season really plays out, just because of LSU's talent level and their Brian Kelly, a head coach, like I can't see them going to Tennessee and being like a 12-point dog. Like that just will never happen. So makes for a really interesting year. That's for sure.
Guys, let's kind of wrap this up. We'll have our predictions, of course, for the game on the BengalTiger.com. Let's finish with one recruiting takeaway from Shea. You're 3 months off. Matty B, you could just drop whatever you want at this point since you didn't have any time off. What stood out or stands out to you about this class where it currently stands in the 2023 cycle?
I'll kick it off, and also I'll close out with a thought on the team. I'll come back around so that I can say this before they play a game. I would say recruiting takeaway wise, I like that as a staff, they seem to now be on the same page of it kind of went quiet, but they set this, foundation again, much like the team. They built this foundation. They got to know all the kids. They, put out their board, adjusted it. And by July 1st, they had 5 commits and were ranked number 50 in the country, basically. Now they have 21 commits and are ranked number 5 in the country. Well, what happened? Across that month and a half, dominoes kept dropping of guys that they had put in the groundwork on. They had sold kind of their vision to, and guys had bought in. And I think it was impressive. Not a lot of schools, and this speaks to LSU, obviously, not just the head coach, can have back-to-back 500 seasons and then just start the next season in the top 5 of the recruiting rankings, and it not be like they're NIL-ing everyone to death, and they're going to get all the best players no matter what. Like, that's not the case here. LSU's not one of those schools that puts themselves into that conversation. I think it just shows that they've buckled in, and I like that they've come back to Louisiana, obviously, and cleaned up with a number of guys, and especially in the Baton Rouge area. I mean, Shelton Sampson, a receiver, Caleb Jackson, a running back, Ricky Collins, a quarterback, out at Zachary, Kylan Jackson, a safety, and the list sort of goes on, obviously. I don't know when you'll be listening to this podcast, but Zaylon Turner, a 5-star offensive tackle, announces on Thursday night at Neville, and all signs point to LSU getting him. That's another one of the biggest dominoes you could drop in Louisiana. I like guys that it's clear they're going to try to sell this national brand, and we'll talk a ton about this on all the podcasts, but right now the D-line is a case in point of how they did that. There's not a lot of D-line in Louisiana this year. They went out and Jamar Kane got 4 of the top 100 players in the country who are, top 5 at their position on the D-line, and had to do it in Baltimore or Minnesota or, wherever it was to get big-time talent, Georgia. I like that. So I've got no qualms right now with their recruiting. These guys haven't signed. I could change my mind just like they could, but with the trajectory it's on now, I can't see anything as an LSU fan that I would complain about.
I mean, yeah, you summed it up well. I think for me, over the past couple months, and obviously I've been working a lot of those, but for me, watching the ceiling of this recruiting class rise has been interesting. And I don't mean that as in like LSU wasn't expected to have a really good class. Of course they were. But again, 3 months ago, if you ask, I think any of us, and if you ask any LSU fan, it's like, where will this class finish? Most people probably say like 8 to 10 range. I think that's pretty comfortable. And
I would have said a top 10 finish would have been like winning 10 games. I would have been like, that'd be amazing.
Exactly. So that's why you go from that to now with not only like a guy like potentially Zalen's Hurd, but you got other guys like Nicholas Harbor, you got a Javian Taviano, as other guys they're in on, and that's icing on the cake, because the cake is already so good at this point, where even if they don't miss out on those other guys and they just fill out the class to 25 with a couple other solid players, they're probably going to finish in the 6-7 range at worst at this point, if everything goes to plan. And then if you get Taviano, if you get those other guys, you get a top 5 class. And like Shea just said, like that seemingly has come out of nowhere, and it's complete credit to this coaching staff, because while it doesn't seem like they are a huge, they're not the NIL player that some other schools are, maybe in Texas, they still have managed to wield that NIL enough and pair that with the relationships that they have into a potential top 5, top 6 class. So for those reasons, I mean, I've just been extremely excited and extremely impressed with what this staff has done.
I'll wrap up here with my thought on the team. And I want to say this before they play their first game. And this is not me waffling. My predictions are on the site. I'll back up here and stick with what I think. I think they're, as Matthew talked about earlier, I think this is a 7-8 win team. And I would say that's the floor, but it's not far from the ceiling. And I say that because of this. If things look, and again, Florida State, like, it won't surprise me. Brian Kelly said this. He didn't say they were going to lose, but he said, week 1 doesn't do much for me to tell me how my season's going to go. Like, I'm going to have a different team in October. I'm going to have a different team in November. But LSU fans should remember this. And probably this has never happened at any point in history in the LSU football program, at least not in modern history. They replaced the head coach, both coordinators, 9 of the 10 on-field staffers, the strength coach and Tommy Moffitt, who had been here multiple decades, obviously, through Saban and Les and O and obviously, dating back even pre-2000. You're changing all those things. Then you took a record number of transfers for the program, obviously, more transfers than any other team in college football. You're starting a new quarterback, no matter who it is. You're got basically everything about the program, the nutritionist, how it's run, everything changed. So there's years where you just get a new D coordinator and all of a sudden you're like, damn, we didn't make a good hire there, or this ain't gelling, and that's derailing the season. Brian Kelly is an unbelievable track record head coach, but putting all that thing, marrying all of that at one time in 6 months, and then to go out and be able to expect a really competitive product and to look good every weekend would be earning his paycheck and some. So I'm not Kelly apologist here, none of that. I'm just saying if they go out and win 7 games and look bad at times and look better at times, that won't surprise me at all. In fact, it's what I expect.
The good thing is we don't have to wait any longer, guys. Games are here. It's been a long summer.
Wait, do we have one more minute? We'll do this 30 seconds so we're not wasting people's time. For people who don't know, Matthew and Billy both came out of the SMU and North Texas communities. That's where they cut their chops. Billy's still cutting his chops on the SMU side. But SMU and North Texas grads, and the time we start, Thursday that we all start together, 2 days later, y'all two decide to have the football game. I looked at the predictions, so Matthew, you could just answer this because Billy talks plenty of SMU.
Yeah, let me talk.
Does the Mean Green got a shot here? Because I'm looking at double-digit favorites for SMU.
Absolutely. They absolutely have a shot. 10-point dogs is nothing. Nebraska Northwestern last week with 13.5. I mean, come on, 10. Nothing. And it's in Denton. Billy, you remember 2018? We'll see how it goes. Well, we got a podcast coming over there, Billy.
Yep.
We'll get it going. We'll talk over there.
Yep. We'll have plenty to talk about.
Billy, are you predicting SMU?
Yes.
No, he's picking North Texas.
Yeah.
He told me he's picking North Texas. He said he's terrified.
We'll revisit this briefly on the pod next week to see which one of you gets the bragging rights for the next year, or at least until basketball season, and then you can change the subject.
I'm still holding on to 2018, Billy, so it doesn't matter. I'm good.
Well,
I have that the rest of my life.
Another first year head coach, or first year with the program head coach. So we'll see. We'll see. A lot of talent in that one.
All right.
So. Yeah, I bet. All right, boys. Billy, you want to wrap us up? You're the one who's been here and hosted it forever by yourself. Sorry that we're talking all over you.
No, man. What a run to 8 months. Appreciate everybody who jumped on board, dealt with me while I was away on the honeymoon. They probably wish I would, stay away and LSU could keep stacking up, 4 and 5 star recruits during that time. But so pumped to have Maddie B and Shea joining Peter and I. It's going to be a blast. Tons of coverage, content, scoop, video, everything to come at thebengaltiger.com and On3 overall. I mean, tell your friends we're next up. This is going to be a lot of fun to see what Shannon and co continue to build. And we're just happy to be a part of it. Subscribe, $1 for a full year. I mean, that's nothing, literally nothing. So tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your LSU friends, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, all those things, but especially subscribe to thebengaltiger.com. Thanks for listening to us blabber on about how excited we are to be here. And we'll have all your coverage of LSU Florida State this weekend. So stay tuned on the site and appreciate you guys being here.